Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Join me today. He's an entrepreneur and the CEO and founder of Beanie and Blazer. It's Brandon Walker. How are you doing today, Brandon?
I'm doing great, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to learn more about your Rise to the Challenge. What we do with all of our guests is we go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what were you involved in growing up?
I grew up in a town called Aurora, Ohio, outside of Akron, Cleveland area. Grew up playing a lot of basketball. That was my big passion from childhood through my teen years and into college. But yeah, grew up pretty typical life, public schools, parents, brother, all that good stuff. Nothing too crazy.
What brought you to basketball? Was it a person that you liked watching, or was it just like the skills that you could learn on the court?
I'm 6'5", so I have a natural, inclination towards sports that I can leverage my height. But there was just something about it that really clicked for me early on. It was the sport. It was something that I was naturally pretty good at. So that feeling of like attention and being good at something really perpetuated it throughout, my youth and teenage years.
Was there any motivations, inspirations you had growing up?
As far as basketball goes?
Anything, just in general.
Yeah, I think, a lot of role models and external factors that were based in sports early on were a lot of my primary motivators. But as I got older and connected more with coaches or people in my specific network, as I learned more about entrepreneurship and business, having other people sort of who have carved paths out before has been a big part of my path, just leaning into that sort of advice and guidance.
What's the biggest thing you learned about yourself growing up?
I think a lot of the lessons weren't learned until I was in my 20s. Like stuff from my teens didn't quite stick, everything you have to learn it a few times before it really resonates. And so I think, one, just being comfortable with who I am, not trying to project or be overly funny or try to fit in with a particular social schema. That was really impactful. And just having confidence in what I'm naturally good at and trying to build on my strengths and not be detracted too far by my weaknesses. That was something that's been really impactful to get comfortable leaning into.
Growing up, was the self-confidence not there, or like you said, that it didn't really make a big impact until in your 20s where you kind of realized these things were happening?
I think I had self-confidence in terms of like I would do stuff without totally knowing what I was doing and just try and figure it out. But I didn't have I had the insecurities and socially, right? Like I didn't quite know where I fit in. And so I would try to wear different hats and be a chameleon with different friend groups. And so that wasn't until my 20s where I was just like, all right, I'm gonna do me, and whoever the people are that I gravitate towards and attract, great. Otherwise, I'm not gonna try and, mold my personality or the way I behave to fit in with a particular stratification.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially myself, with the whole trying to find where you fit in. As I was a person that I was not the normal type of person where I was kind of like a unique in a way. And I knew that my true friends were going to be the people that could understand who I am as a person. And I don't talk to many people from high school, which to me, it kind of benefits because maybe they weren't my friends or the real people, because after that, usually you want to talk to them. But I was always trying to find who I am and fit in. But then as I got older, I'm kind of like, I can't do that anymore. People are going to accept me for who I am as a person, and I want those people to be around me for the future.
I love that. I had a mentor teach me this phrase. It's reason, season, lifetime. And the idea is some people in our lives are there for a particular reason, right? Like there's a goal that you're trying to accomplish. There's a thing that you're trying to learn, whatever. And somebody is there to help make that transition. People are in your life for a season. So whether that's a romantic relationship, a friendship, a mentor, And then there are people who are going to be there for a lifetime, who are the ones that you really want to bond to and make sure you're pouring a ton into those relationships. And I think like once you sort of get comfortable with the fact that not every person that you're going to connect with is going to be somebody that is going to be there with you through thick and thin for the long run, it takes a lot of pressure off of socializing. And so like, yeah, whether it's people from high school or college or, different communities that, church, school, whatever that you're a part of, it's nice to know like, okay, cool. Maybe they are still my friends or acquaintances, but like, I know their seasons or their reasons. That was really helpful for me in characterizing people.
What was that dream job that you were wanting? We all have that. We want to be this or this, but what was that for you?
For me, it's always been to become an entrepreneur, and to have my own startup company, be able to run my own thing, own the goods, the bads, the uglies. Little bit non-traditional, but I have a home video from first grade. The teacher asked what I want to be when I grow up, and I say an entrepreneur. And so that's literally been a goal of mine since I was a little kid.
Was that mindset that you were going to do anything to become an entrepreneur and maybe not let anything stop you from reaching your goals?
Yeah, I think like sort of like I was talking about earlier, the balance of self-confidence and insecurity and where those things play into one another. I think it's easy to say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, and you jump in head first and you have no idea what you're doing. And that's actually a really high risk proposition. Like you may either go broke or, lead people in the wrong direction, lead investors astray. It's a high risk endeavor. And so for me, I knew I wanted to get some experience and mentorship from somebody who has been an entrepreneur before. And so that's where I spent my early 20s is in education, trial by fire. But that being said, I always knew that the outcome was to ultimately learn enough to go do my own thing. So I do think it's been a core motivator and driver for me for my college and adult years specifically.
So talk about that next transition going and pursuing education in college. What was that path like for you?
I played basketball my freshman year of college. Got recruited to I got a scholarship for basketball. But while I was there, I started a bike taxi company, one of those pedicab things, and took people doing brewery tours and hired a couple guys from the college to run tours for me. And once I really got immersed in that, I ended up leaving the basketball team to double down on business stuff. And then I ended up transferring after my sophomore year. I moved to North Carolina from Michigan. And that was how I ultimately ended up meeting the folks from Untapped and got involved with that business. But yeah, the path to school was initially bred from basketball.
Did you kind of see that maybe basketball wasn't going to get you where you want, and you knew that I had to look at what was the best option for me and make that commitment?
Yeah, I definitely thought going into college that I would probably play basketball professionally overseas for a period after I graduated from college. And keep playing the sport that I love, experience a new country and culture. You don't get paid a ton doing that, but you get to experience a lot. And then as I further explored entrepreneurship, there was sort of this fork in the road that was, okay, if I sort of cast my vision out 3-5 years, which one is going to facilitate more of, what I want lifestyle wise. And ultimately it became, the entrepreneurial stuff outweighed the basketball at that point.
So when you made that transition to North Carolina, did you kind of have that starting where maybe I don't want to finish the college education and want to go right into the business world?
Yeah, I ended up dropping out after my junior year of college and joining with a startup. So the opportunity to be a part of something that I thought had a lot of potential in the early days seemed more valuable than finishing school at the time. And so fortunately, that ended up paying off. The company did really well, and it was a really fun ride to be a part of. But yeah, it's sort of like anytime that I make a decision, you're assessing the cost, both in terms of time and money and labor and effort versus the value of the return. So you're thinking ROI, it's like on a fulcrum almost, right? And so as the value of a decision starts to tip the scales and outweighs the potential risk, you move on that action. And so for me, it's like, okay, you can drop out of school having a semester and a half, or excuse me, a year and a half left. I can always go back, right? But I'll never have this opportunity with this company at this point again. And the risk of missing out on that is real world experience and potential financial upside and et cetera. So for me, it became an easy decision to drop out.
Did you have that support system with you on making that decision, or did you kind of have to kind of be selfish in a way and look at what's best for me?
Good question. My parents, I would say it was somewhere in between. Like at the time, I was just really starting to demonstrate a level of maturity that I hadn't in high school and in college. And so they were like cautiously optimistic, right? Like, you know, if you have a degree, that at least you have that piece of paper that you can adhere on a resume. So it is some sort of security long term. So they were really excited by the potential of me going and doing this. They bought into the fact that I could go back to school if I needed to, but it's not like they were immediately turned on to the idea of me at, 19, 20 years old, dropping out and joining this company that they had never heard of and this entrepreneur they'd never heard of. So they were, and very quickly, once I and the company started demonstrating that, hey, this is real, we can handle this, it looks like it's going to work, they became super supportive and doubled down and have been amazing family and friends for me.
So how did you find out about Untapped? Was it from like searching it on the internet, or did they come to you and find this opportunity for you?
I had known about the app. So Untapped, for folks who are unfamiliar, it's a social media platform for beer drinkers. So we call it it's like Facebook for beer. So you can check in at different locations. You can earn badges for different beers that you've had and types of bars and restaurants that you've visited. So it's a really fun way to log what beers you've had and places that you visited. And so I knew of the app as a user, but didn't know anything about the backstory logging beers that I had, because I was doing that pedicab brewery tour thing. And so I started enjoying craft beer. And it wasn't in Wilmington, in North Carolina, where I live. It's a relatively small town. There's a small but growing entrepreneurial community. And so embedding myself in that community, I got to know who the entrepreneurs in town were that were doing stuff. And there was a company called Next Glass that ultimately ended up acquiring Untapped. I had started with Next Glass as an intern when I was 20. And that was when Untapped came into the fold, was through an acquisition. And then we started growing that business with that initial team that I had joined at Next Glass.
So working as an intern, did you kind of have some doubts, like, I don't know where this is going to go? Or were you all in and wanting to see it grow and see how far you can get with it?
I was all in. Like, I think a few things. Being entrepreneurially minded, it's most of us have a ridiculously optimistic outlook on things, like whether it's trusting in your ability to problem solve or just believing in universality and karma, that things just work out if you put in the work and have good intentions. Whatever it is, I like to believe that things can, you look for the good, not the bad. And so I was really excited by it. And I personally can become pretty obsessive on things. And so once I had my teeth sunk into that and I realized how much fun it was for me, I became single track minded and was really like insistent and persistent on making it work. So yeah, once I got in as an intern, I looked for any avenue I could to get more deeply involved, come on full time, and have more responsibilities and leadership opportunities.
How high within the company did you get with Untapped?
When I left, I was senior vice president of sales.
So talk about that role in a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So starting off, we basically what I did and what our team did was we sell software to bars, restaurants, breweries, liquor stores. So for consumers, the Untapped app is always free, but for businesses, they pay to be able to market their products and their events and stuff to the users on the platform. And so I was tasked with writing the scripts and setting up the software for us to be able to actually start selling to these businesses. And so in the early days, it was me cold calling Canadian pubs, trying to sell our software and getting feedback on that. And by the time that I left, we had a team of 45 salespeople with, managers and directors underneath me and sales operations people. And so my role went from a lot more of like doing the actual selling to managing a really big team that ultimately led our revenue growth. And so Untapped was, named to the Inc. 500 list of the 500 fastest growing companies in the country. We were on the top 250 3 years in a row. We won awards for our company culture. It transitioned from being an operator to being a strategist and a leader.
When you were in the role of managing people, what made you a great, effective leader?
Well, thank you for assuming that I'm an effective leader. I appreciate that. So I think, one of the things we did at Untapped, and this is part of the reason why I ultimately started Beanie and Blazer, is we took a pretty unique approach to management. So instead of in a typical sales environment, it's like, okay, you can make, let's say $80,000, $100,000, whatever the number is. You just sell your ass off, plug in, do the job, and go make this money. Now, in today's world, whether it's like millennials or geography, looking for work-life balance, people aren't as heavily incentivized by making more money. A lot of people really value having work-life balance and being able to make a good living, but prioritizing other things like the company culture and family and relationships, et cetera. So we set up a training program that trained people on how to be like holistically well off. And so thinking about things like we would train on sleep and relationships and habits and goal setting and personal self-talk. And when you start training people on a lot of this stuff that doesn't have anything to do with software or sales, more positive, and the positivity bleeds into their work at Untapped, and it makes the team culture stronger. And so us taking that approach on leadership and management, I think was creative and gave us, it made us a much, much stronger team. And so I like to think that I played a role in us leading the company that way.
Actually, as you're describing it, I kind of like that approach in a way. Kind of like look at the different areas outside of the work that they do, but like the person themselves. And if they're able to help in those areas, that you'll see like better results when they get into the office and stuff. Because I know with some of the companies I've worked with, we don't see that. They kind of just, you're here to work, you better do the right thing, go home, you're on your own in a way. And it kind of looks at you guys are getting more involved in the relationship with your workers, which is a great field. And it shows like being an effective leader is you're coming up with a concept that many companies don't do, and you're seeing the results happen.
Yeah, thanks. It was a lot of fun, building out that curriculum and seeing people develop and grow from 22-year-old entry-level salespeople to whether their professional position, they got promoted, or you just see their lives start improving through some of the material. That was really, really gratifying for me as a leader.
So during this time with Untapped, did you ever have that thought, maybe I should go back to college, or maybe do both at the same time, do like online school just to get that paper that we all talk about?
Nope. I've sort of come to the opinion that at this point, with as much experience as I have, and since my intention is to be an entrepreneur right from here on out, now if I'm building my own companies and hiring my own people, it doesn't matter if I have a degree, right? Like whatever, I have the outcome that I wanted. In the event that I fail as an entrepreneur and have to go get a job with another company, like I have to go join the workforce as an employee at that point, I would be really turned off by a company that values that piece of paper more than my actual experience and what I'm able to bring to the table. And so I sort of use that as a proxy or a filter to decide who I would want to engage with. So if I'm in an interview and they're like, hey, Brandon, you're great, but you don't have a degree, it wouldn't be the right company for me to be a part of anyways.
Would you say for entrepreneurs, they look at more of the work or the experience out in the real world than trying to learn everything from a textbook kind of thing? They get the more benefit from getting out there and really diving deep into the mud.
Yeah, I think you can learn by learning or you can learn by doing. And so learning by learning is, you watch a ton of YouTube videos, you read books, you see tutorials and demos, and there's a lot of room for that, like when you're researching and trying to get your head around a subject. But when it comes to like deep learning, you have to accumulate scar tissue. And the way that you do that is by having experience failing, experience failing, experience failing, experience. Oh, I got it right that time. And when you can learn things by, you burn your finger and not to touch the stove, it helps you build a perspective on the world that is yours, not what case studies or textbooks are going to tell you about it. And being able to actually own that knowledge yourself through experience is way more deeply embedded as an educational tool. But you're actually building stuff in the real world. And so there's value being created, not just an ingestion of information.
I can totally relate. I feel that I got more experience and better understanding of the knowledge and the information from actually doing it than reading about it. Because when I can take the situation and use it in my daily life, I know what I did wrong, what I did right, what can I improve. We're always doing those analysis in a way. But when we're just writing it in a piece of paper on a homework or an essay, you're not really getting that understanding because you're just going on the internet, Googling everything. So it's kind of like we all have that entrepreneurial side of us on how we are able to take that information and learn from it.
I think that's super true. There's a stat that I learned recently that in a traditional college class, only 12 to 15% of the material that is taught is actually retained. Like the model's so broken, like lecture, homework, quiz, or test, students are actually only retaining after a few months 12% of the material that they're learning. So when you think about how inefficient that is, there's a lot of room for the way education is done in general to be improved. That forces people to do more exercises and application-based learning, because that's what makes stuff stick. And again, there's value being created.
I can agree to that. I don't even remember half the stuff that I learned in college now.
No.
It's classes I'm like, what did I even learn? Like that, but it goes with that 10-15% is retained, but it's kind of like one of those things where we retain the things we want to know, and then we don't retain the things we don't want to know, like classes. So how did you know that it was ready for the next transition after Untapped? When did you kind of start thinking, what's next for me?
Last autumn, or I've had the idea now for Beanie and Blazer or the initial version of it came into my head last April. So it's been 16 months now when I initially had the seed planted, and it's evolved a lot from what that initial idea was. But it was last autumn going into the winter where I was sort of just craving more responsibility and ownership with the work that I was doing. I felt like I had been leading this sales effort for a long time. I had learned a lot from it, and I wasn't continuing to grow in the way that I like to. My comfort zone wasn't being pushed. And that makes me always start to feel a little bit squirrely or uneasy or restless. And so I started seeking out opportunities within the company to try and have more, not even upward mobility, but just lateral responsibility. And ultimately this spring, I was offered, the opportunity to step up and have a more senior level position, which was wonderful. And then the company exited to a growth equity firm, which is going to help Untap continue to grow and bring in more resources to go internationally and have some other cool features to the platform. And when that happened, leadership is changing. The company structure starts evolving to be a little bit more corporate. And it just felt like a really natural inflection point for me to go pursue my entrepreneurial dreams instead of, staying on board that company as it continued to grow and change in the way that it's operated day to day.
Did you kind of have that thought of, I'm taking a huge risk by starting right at the beginning of creating this company? Or did you know that I'm going to do all I can to make it work?
I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. Like, yeah, it's definitely high risk, and I'm going to do whatever I need to make this happen. And so I'm very fortunate. I've been able to build a strong team around me who help complement my weaknesses. And I feel really good about what we're doing. And I'll obviously be helpful for listeners. We can explain what Beanie and Blazer is, but I think that coming off of COVID, like there are a few things that are in our favor. One, COVID has provided a lot of time for people to self-reflect and figure out what it is that they want to do next in life, more time to just think than we've had ever. And so with that, a lot of people are looking for groups of people or communities to help them make the changes that they want to make in their lives. And that's a good opportunity for us to be helpful. The education system is obviously changing. We've touched on this a little bit, but traditional college, the higher education bubble, and the influx of alt education stuff like Mind Valley or Masterclass or Coursera, some of those programs. There's a lot of trends meeting that make us feel confident in the type of platform that we're creating for education and community.
So with Beanie and Blazer, how did you come up with that
name? So I went on a crazy adventure dirt biking trip in Mexico. It was a really scary, mind expansive adventure for 5 days with a group of guys. It's my first time ever being on a dirt bike, was going on this epic adventure. And while I was on the trip, I got my ass kicked. Like, I crashed a whole bunch, and we had an amazing time, but I came back a little bit battered. And so while I was out there, I was like, man, there's something about going for adventures that really open up your perspective and help you ingrain new habits and ideas and beliefs. And so the idea behind Beanie represents mindset. It represents adventure. It's getting out of your comfort zone, doing atypical things for the sake of learning. And then Blazer represents application. Like, once you learn these new things, you go and apply them back into your job, your family, etc. So the idea is that juxtaposition of learning and implementing, adventure, application, etc.
For someone that maybe does not know what Beanie and Blazer is, if you had to sum up the company in like a sentence or two, what is your mission that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so we define ourselves as a lifestyle engineering company. And so what a lifestyle engineer is it's somebody who creates experiments and lives their life in a way that ensures that their value set is being represented in the actions that they take. And so what we do is we train aspiring high performers. So people who want to better embody their personal values, want to step up their game professionally, personally, in relationships. We give them a lot of tools, tricks rooted in neuroscience, and fundamental ways of looking at things that help them integrate their values and their habits together so they can live a more fulfilled life. And our mission is to do that at scale for millions of people.
Do you work with more individuals or businesses that are a part of your program?
So right now it's all consumer facing. So we're launching our first product in November. It's called the Mindset Accelerator. And that's a 6-week program. It's me, a PhD of neuroscience and neurology at the UNLV School of Medicine, and an executive coach. We wrote the curriculum for this 6-week program. We accepted 12 students into the beta, and the idea is to train them on how to become high performers, again, through the lens of their values. So that is our first push, is spinning up that program for people at a bigger scale.
Do you guys communicate with these people on a weekly basis or a daily basis? And what are you trying to get out of these people to find in themselves?
So the interactions will be, a lot of live videos and pre-recorded videos, one-on-one coaching, workshops. So there are a lot of touch points with the individuals going through the program. And I think we know if it's successful, if by the end of it, we have seen people get clarity of their purpose in life. Like a lot of us go through the motions. You and I talked about this a little bit. From the moment that we're born, we're being conditioned. So our parents, our school system, our community, our church, our, college experience, all of that makes up this belief system that's loosely called the American dream of how you're supposed to live, what you're supposed to value. And the idea is a lot of people have midlife crises or feel really disassociated from life later on because they haven't taken the time to establish their own set of values. They're still living by those that have been projected onto them by other people. And so we want to bring clarity of purpose where you're very intentionally understanding who you want to be, how you want to get there. So that's part one. We help people build tribes. So surrounding themselves with mentors and supporters to help them on their path to success for themselves. We start helping integrate that into their lives. And we help folks with time management and productivity. So it's a matter of, hey, how am I managing my schedule? How am I reflecting on my day-to-day and making sure that I'm optimizing that pursuit of my goals and my values?
For the things that you teach and use with these individuals, are you using the same concepts in your daily life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like anybody else, all of us have this idea of who we are now and who we want to be. All of us have this, right? And so there's always going to be this gap between like point A where I am and point B where I want to be. And what happens is some people get really anxious and overwhelmed and frustrated with themselves because I want to be this person and I'm not this person. Then there are other people who say, okay, I'm proud of the person that I am. I know I have a lot of room to grow, but I'm going to enjoy the struggle and the process to continue growing. And so like anybody else, I'm not perfect. It's not like I do everything 100% right all the time, but this ideal version myself very much embodied in this program. And I do integrate these habits and these tools that, again, are rooted in neuroscience best practices. They're done by entrepreneurs and athletes and business people. So yeah, the idea is just staying positive about where you are and understanding that the journey is the whole point. And that's really what's fun about life.
Is there any concepts or business models that you took from your previous experience that you are using with your company today?
Yeah, definitely. So I think like the most obvious one is I was training salespeople on a lot of these things, and the outcome was to be a better salesperson. I'm using a lot of those same trainings and methodologies, only instead of trying to make people better salespeople, I'm trying to help them live in alignment with their values. So what that means to you is going to be very different from me, is going to be different from Sam and Jody and whomever. And so we're trying to make it a more universally applicable program. But then from a business perspective, like, yeah, how you do financial models and how you sell the platform and build the website and all of that stuff I've learned in the past from my experience at Untapped. So it's impossible to cleave the two apart from one another.
So the one thing on this show is we always talk about the journey that we're all going on and what we've learned about ourselves. At the position that you're in today, what's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself? As we talk about when we get to college, what we've learned about ourselves, that first job, what we learned about ourselves. Now where you are today, what is something new you've learned?
Yeah, man, I think like, thinking about rising to the challenge, that probably means something different for a lot of people, right? Like, it's almost like we talked about the reason, season, lifetime. The challenge could be, I'm going to run this marathon. The challenge could be, I'm going to beat this cancer. The challenge could be, I am going to be my best self. Like, it's, you can take it and repackage it in a lot of different ways, right? But all of those things have some underlying characteristics that are consistently going to be true. So rising to the challenge means you're resilient, you have grit, you are perseverant, you are positive, you're communicative. Like, there are some fundamentally true things about being able to rise to a challenge. And one of the most important things that I've learned about myself, or for people in similar positions, is you have way more in the tank than you think you do. Like, the human spirit can stretch and is so malleable. And I don't just mean that in terms of you're able to work 100 hours a week if you want to. It's not even necessarily about just being more productive. It's a matter of, the way that your habits can be changed, or the people that you surround yourself with, or the amount of effort that you put in, or your discipline. All of that can be controlled. It's just a matter of focus and energy and, willingness to accept ownership. And so me placing a new lens on some of those subjects has been really powerful, and me really stepping into the shoes of the buck stops with me mentality via entrepreneurship.
It kind of goes back to what we talked about with the reflection, where COVID has brought a time to do self-reflection in a way. And when you talked about the focus and what lens you'll look at and how you're going to look at it, I've done the same thing with, I'm doing that self-reflection now, where what's important to me, what do I want to maybe change or maybe restructure in a way to help me be more positive, be more productive in a way. And I've made some of those sacrifices. And did it hurt? Yes. But I know that it's going to keep me going on that positive track and going in the right direction. And like we said, with the seasons and people talking, those people may come back in my life, but we just need to take a break from it right now. But it's not like I'm not going to forget about those people. It's just at this timing right now, it's just what's best for us at the moment.
Exactly. I think relationships are such a good one to point to as being something that's hard to change, but is like really critical to keep growing. And the analogy I always use is, it's like, okay, pretend the path to like being Alex, like full blown Alex, full embodiment of your self-expression. Let's say that you're climbing a mountain, right? Like, your path to success is you were trying to summit this mountain. Having people in your life who are toxic, who don't support him and energy, think about it as having a shit ton of extra gear that you don't need. Like, yes, you can keep going up the mountain, but you don't need to bring bricks on the trip with you, right? So every extra pound of luggage that you have on your back while you're climbing is going to make the climb that much harder, that much more exhausting. And so when you apply that to you being Alex, just the cognitive and emotional load of having to manage relationships with people who may not be privy to some of the stuff that you're working on or your ambitions, or every time you talk, you feel drained from having that conversation. Like you said, it's not necessarily a matter of you just snip it all together and say you're out, but it's putting boundaries around it. Like, okay, I'm not going to let myself get sucked into these types of conversations. We're only going to talk about these subjects. I'm not going to get into politics. Like, whatever the things are that you need to protect your headspace and not carry those extra bricks with you is really effective in starting to, lighten the load, so to speak.
I think a lot of people listening to this episode will know the same meaning of what's holding them back going up that mountain. What do they need to do to maybe change that? And they're learning with us talking about what do they need to do next in that self-reflection. So what does the future look like for you personally and professionally?
I think, as far as the business goes, for us, it's continuing to pour into our students, get the first product launched. We have our podcasts and our essays, and we're continuing to learn about our marketing and our educational approach. And so it's just building the business is single track minded for me. And then personally, I'm hoping to, move to a new city early next year. And so I'm exploring and trying to find some areas that would be fun for me to move to.
Talking about your podcast, I watched a video of you, I think on your podcast, and you kind of talked about the why with everything. Like if someone asks you the question and you answer, and then it's like, why did you think that way? And then you continue that. What's the goal with the podcast? What do you want a listener to learn from that? And I enjoyed that video that I watched because it kind of made me think, why am I responding in those ways? Why am I thinking in those terms? It kind of does, it's kind of all about that reflection in a way.
Yeah. So the five whys was initially from Toyota. Like they did that to try and solve problems with their lean manufacturing. And then I've sort of like, piggybacked and called it the seven whys and repurposed it for like psychology and real motivations for people. So yeah, that clip, I love that because it's just showing how, a person owning a Tesla, you can have an opinion about that or a judgment on that, but there is a real root reason why somebody owns a Tesla or lives in a certain type of house or something. And so understanding a person's true objective or true motivation helps you better be able to empathize and connect with them. And so it's a really powerful tool just to like process through who a person really is. As far as our objectives with the podcast, it's a lot of these concepts that we talk about and train on are either new ideas that we're coming up with, or it's leaning into, stuff from stoicism and philosophy and neuroscience and chemistry. And we like to play in a lot of different arenas. And the podcast is a mechanism for us to learn publicly and also to share information with people so they can benefit from some of these lessons that we've learned or studied through clients or research. And ultimately, from the business's perspective, we want those podcasts and those essays to attract people into our ecosystem. So ultimately they become customers and part of our community. So the hope is they're attracted with the information and they want to be more deeply invested with us.
For someone that's getting into the entrepreneurial industry, what tips or advice would you give them to rise to their challenge in that industry?
Find mentors. I think it's really easy to have an ego and say, I can figure this out, or, thinking that other people wouldn't be interested in helping, not wanting to be a burden. One of the first exercises I always make people go through is to come up with a list of 100 people who would be like, if you could just have 3 wishes and one of these people is my mentor or my friend, find 100 people, like get really aggressive, like Elon Musk, put him on there, put Michael Jordan there, and then, have a list of 100 people and try and get their email addresses, send cold messages and try to get mentorship. And if you send 100 of these, let's say 5 or 10 turn it, you get responses, and then 3 of those you get a phone call, and of those you land one amazing mentor that you never would have gotten otherwise. A lot of people look at that and say, well, shit, that's a lot of work to land one person. But what if that one person can change your entire life, your business, etc.? So prioritizing mentorship, I think, is really, really important. And then the other thing is go fast, like learn quickly, fail fast, because it's easy to want to be a perfectionist, but what's perfect to you may not actually be marketable and people may not care about it. So all that extra time you're spending on stuff trying to make it exactly as you want it may just be overkill. So ship it, try to go fast, and then learn from your customers and adjust as you need to. I think those are really important characteristics for aspiring entrepreneurs.
I think that mentorship message that you gave is perfect, because I think a lot of people have doubt that, oh, I'm not going to hear a response. And it's kind of like, for me, even with this show, I want to try to reach out to as many people as possible. And I can't regret not being able to send that message. I would rather take the no than not try at all. So, and I like that because I've been able to find those people that help me become a better podcaster, become a better marketing person. And it's just going to help me grow as an individual. So it's one of those things that you have to put yourself out there in a way and go for it. You can't say, I don't want to do this. You got to say, let me try and do this.
Exactly. And good for you, man. That's awesome. You've done that intuitively.
Thank you. The final question I want to ask for someone that's listening to this interview, from your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give someone to overcome their obstacles, to accomplish their goals, and to rise to their challenge?
I think, so we already touched on this a little bit, but number one, in my opinion, is understanding what your values are. So there are values and there are anti-values, and there are multiple levels of it. There are ones that are conscious and there are ones that are subconscious. But all of those values, whether it's your coping mechanisms or your proclivity for exercise or how engaged you want to be with friends and family and relationships, the way that we feel about these things dictates how we behave, for good or for bad. And a lot of people, like I said earlier, just sort of go through the motions and don't take the time to reflect on that. Having that clarity of what are the things that drive you, good, bad, or otherwise, whether you're moving away from fear or in pursuit of something that is really cool or exciting to you, knowing what your values and anti-values are, I think, is the most important first step. Because if you think about it, that dictates the type of romantic relationship you should be in based on your values for marriage and living in one spot. It dictates the type of work that you should be doing to feel fulfilled, whether it's financially or culturally or like with work-life balance. It dictates the type of programs or groups that you sign up to be a part of. It has so many trickle-down effects if you think about it and filter your life through that lens. So going through that exercise first, I think is really important. And then it's number two is understanding that any challenge that you're trying to overcome, it's going to be an ebb and a flow. So it's a little bit bipolar. You're going to feel really good some days, like you're on top of the world and you're on a mission and you're making it happen. And then other days you're just going to feel like you got kicked in the gut and why am I doing this? This is a waste of time. Nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention, whatever those scripts are that we start running in our head. And so coming up with ways, and we teach a lot of this, right? But coming up with ways that you can maintain that positive orientation for exceptionalism and what I'm capable of, and preventing yourself from backsliding into your old habits, old routines that you want to step above. Just understanding that there is going to be the roller coaster and you can mitigate that, I would say are two of the most important things.
Well, Brandon, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. We're all excited to see what the future for Beanie and Blazer is and see what the future has for you.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's been an awesome time talking with you.